Live from Fort Defiance, hard by the Supreme Court on Capitol Hill in our nation's capital. It is Wednesday, the 15th of April, the year of our Lord 2020. Welcome back to War Room Pandemic. Raheem Kassam, Jack Maxey, Jason Miller, Stephen K. Bannon, the entire posse's here. We're live on the John Fredericks Radio Network, on americasvoice.news, the streaming service now, Dish, Channel 219, also Newsmax TV, FM 103.9 and 99.1 in Chicago, in Chicagoland, and throughout the world on nexus.org, IRRS, to 250 million English-speaking people. And later in the day, through the firewall and to the VPNs, to the people of China, Lao Beijing, the old 100 names, Radio Free China comes through, and we punch through their compliments of G News and GTV, subtitled in Mandarin. Now I want to, by the way, we're going to talk about in this hour also the opening, what President Trump's going through, all of that. We're going to get to that. But as we say every day, we talk about the pandemic, the economic crisis, the financial crisis it triggered, and the geopolitics. I'm very honored now to be joined by Dr. Stephen Mosher, an old colleague who's an old China hand. He's head of the Population Research Institute and the author of one of the best books on China, Bully of Asia. Dr. Mosher was on Jesse Waters, our good friend Jesse Waters, the other night, trying to walk through this, what happened in Wuhan. And Dr. Mosher, what we've been talking about, Stephen, is how the callousness, went through this AP story for the entire hour in the World Health Organization, the criminality and callousness of the Chinese Communist Party to their own people, particularly the people in Wuhan and Hubei. Actually you had a very good analysis on Jesse. Can you walk us through in a little more depth what you were trying to get at?
Well, let's start by just pointing out that the Chinese Communist Party is the biggest killing machine in human history. They've killed 100 million Chinese. The Chinese are the first and foremost victims of the Chinese Communist Party and have been from the beginning. But now we see what the Chinese Communist Party does to the Chinese people being spread around the world. How did it start? Well, it started in a bat cave about 1,000 kilometers from the city of Wuhan, the center of the pandemic. And in the bat cave was a Mr. Tian who works for one of the biolabs in Wuhan, and he collects bat urine and bat feces and bats, thousands of bats, and he brings them to two Wuhan labs. One is the Center for Disease Control Lab, and the other is the Wuhan Institute of Virology. That's how the intermediate horseshoe bat got from the cave into the city of Wuhan. It didn't fly there. It didn't fly there and land in someone's bat soup. It didn't get taken there by some bat hunter 600 miles and sold in the wet market. That's all just a fabrication. That's a cover story. The bats got to Wuhan because Mr. Tian is hired by the biolabs to catch bats and bring them to the biolabs. What do they do in the biolabs? Well, they check the bats for coronaviruses. China has been on a coronavirus hunting spree for the last 10 years. And by that, I mean that China has collected over the last, 10 years, 2,000 new viruses. Many of them are coronaviruses. Okay? In the previous 200 years, humanity has only collected about 2,300 viruses from wild animals. China has nearly doubled that in the last 10 years just because of this virus collection frenzy. What are they doing with all of these hundreds of potentially infectious coronaviruses in the lab? Well, they're tinkering with them. They're experimenting with them. They're studying them. And from time to time, in these Chinese labs, where the lab protocol is very weak, where mistakes are made, viruses leak out of the lab. And that's what happened in this case. One of Mr. Tian's bats had a dangerous coronavirus. It's very close to what we now know as the COVID-19, causing the COVID-19 epidemic, which I call the Chinese Communist Party virus, by the way. One of those viruses leaked out of the lab, and it killed a lab researcher, Miss Huang Yanqing, was a graduate student working at the lab. She has been disappeared. By that, I mean that her bio, her picture and everything has been scrubbed off the Wuhan Institute of Virology's site. But we understand that she was the original infected person, lab worker, and she infected other lab workers, went to the hospital, infected doctors, and the virus, the CCP virus, spread from there.
Dr. Mosher, you've laid this out in pretty good detail. We now know for the fact that they knew this in as early as December, mid-December to late December. What do you think the remedy should be right now for the World Health Organization, given the fact pattern you've laid out? How do we have to adjudicate this? What type of information, what type of access, what should happen to the World Health Organization in this process and also to the CCP?
Well, as everybody knows by now, that the Chinese Communist Party knew it had a problem in its hands in December. It shut down the research. It closed down the lab of Mr. Zhang in Fudan University, who had first sequenced the genome and released it to the world. He was punished for that, by the way, and his lab was shut down temporarily. And other people, Dr. Li Wenliang, who may have been a Christian, by the way, was forced to sign a confession. So we know about the cover-up. But what people need to focus on is this point here. China shut down the city of Wuhan on January 23rd. And yet it let flights from Wuhan to the rest of the world continue to fly out of that city for the next few days, spreading the coronavirus around the world.
Okay,
so
hang over a second. I want to get this timeline down. They put Hubei province in lockdown in Wuhan on the 23rd of January, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
And they limited travel. They limited travel from Hubei province in Wuhan to any other parts of China, correct?
Right.
And when did they stop? When did they stop international travel?
International flights continued for several more days. In fact, Taiwan put a moratorium on flights from Wuhan the day after China locked down the city, because the flights were still coming. It was up to Taiwan to stop it. China didn't stop it. It wasn't until I think the 29th that President Trump put a block on flights from China to the United States. So again, that's the better part of a week for flights to continue to come from Wuhan to other parts of the world. And in Italy and Iran and other places, I think the flights continued for a lot longer. So that was a deliberate act. And reflect on this point. And in January 1st, the Chinese Communist Party locked down its military bases in Wuhan and Hubei province. Why? Because they wanted to make sure that the guys with the guns were healthy in case there was an insurrection, an uprising because of their mishandling of the epidemic in the city of Wuhan. They didn't tell the people of Wuhan, they didn't tell the people of Hubei province there was a problem, but they told the military and they locked down the military bases. So they knew exactly what was going on. Once they had an epidemic on their hands, they let it continue to spread throughout their population and from their population to the rest of the world. So consequences should be, there should be lots of consequences, Steve. I've argued publicly that we should take away China's sovereign immunity, that we should allow Americans who have been harmed by the evil and incompetence of the Chinese Communist Party to sue the Chinese government and to get a settlement from the court, get a judgment from the court, and enforce it on assets that China owns in the United States. That is to say, everybody who's fallen ill from the virus, everybody who's died, family members have died from the virus, every employee who's lost a job, every company that's forced to shut down should have the right to sue the Chinese government in court. That would be step number one. Step number two, of course, they own $1.1 trillion of our debt. We should probably, along with our allies, refuse to pay on those bonds and simply take them as a down payment on the reparations that China owes the world. I think there are lots of things we could do. I think we should consider recognizing Taiwan. I think that denying diplomatic recognition to Taiwan back in 1979 as the price of establishing diplomatic relations with the PRC was a mistake, and that we should now go back and recognize the Republic of China on Taiwan as a sovereign nation. But the Taipei Act, which was just signed into law by the president, actually has an amendment which says that Taiwan is a nation of 23 million people. And so already in the Taipei Act, there is the reference to the word nation. That's kind of a de facto recognition of Taiwan already. I think that's one step we should take.
Dr. Mosher, we're pressed for time, but I want one more thing. During this time period in January that we're talking about, we know that the Chinese Communist Party went around and swept up all the personal protective equipment out of Europe, Australia, Brazil, and the United States. They now hold it, and they use it as leverage to show how beneficent they are and benevolent they are, and to show how, and actually I think use against the United States to make us a supplicant to get those goods out of China. What do you think ought to be done about their knowingly going and buying all the personal protective equipment in the world, vacuuming it up during the time that they knew they had human-to-human transfer and basically a pandemic starting in Wuhan?
Yeah, think about that. That's not just stopping a shipment of personal protective equipment that was being shipped from China to the United States in transit and bringing it back to China. That was actually going to countries like Australia. Before Australia had a single case of the CCP virus, and buying up all the PPE, buying up all the masks, and then shipping it out of Australia on their own private jets so the Australian government wouldn't know what was going on, and now selling it back to Australia at usurious prices, a markup of 5 or 10 times. What kind of responsible global player does that? China is not a responsible member of the world order. It should be drummed out of the world order. It should be drummed out of all the UN organizations that it's managed to worm its way in. It should be treated as a pariah state. It should be hit with reparations on the order of trillions of dollars. We should have a hard disengage from the Chinese economy. And if that happens, there is a chance that the Chinese people will rise up and overthrow the Chinese Communist Party, because, the Chinese Communist Party legitimizes itself by economic performance. And the economic performance of late has been abysmal. The economy's not growing. It's now going into recession. And I think the Chinese people, after this epidemic, may very well have had enough. It would be the best thing to happen to China and the world if the Chinese Communist Party would be another failed dynasty to join the failed dynasties of the past.
Dr. Mosher, how can people get access to your Twitter account and your website, your book, all of it? Because you're one of the best of the what I call the China hands out there.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Steve, and I appreciate your attention to this issue. This is a watershed moment. We could very well have wound up with China as the dominant power in the world and we as a secondary power. That's not a world I want to live in. I'm following the pandemic at Stephen W. Mosher on Twitter, at Stephen W. Mosher. Our website is pop.org, pop.org. The book is Bully of Asia. It's available everywhere. You can get it from us at pop.org. You can get it from Amazon, all the usual suspects. China is the bully of Asia, but it's not going to win.
Dr. Mosher, thank you for joining us today in the War Room. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
There's a lot of intellectuals and smart people out there like Dr. Mosher, and now they've got to be weaponized, okay? The Chinese Communist Party is at war with their people, they're at war with the world, and they're at war with you. You may not have an interest in this virus, but this virus has got an interest in you. You may not have an interest in the Chinese Communist Party, but it's destroyed your life, okay? Your economic life, your spiritual life, your social life. The destruction is from Beijing. We're going to return in just a moment in the War Room.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
I want to thank the team at Open the Books and the team at the Population Research Institute for helping us get organized and sorted today on the World Health Organization and on the Chinese Communist Party. Now I want to turn back to the United States, and since the CCP has wrought this throughout the world, the economic destruction, the financial destruction, and obviously the pandemic, the death and suffering and misery of not just the American people, but people throughout the world, and it's all over the world now, everywhere. We're eventually going to open the United States back up. We're going to be open for business, and that's coming shortly. The whole question is, how's it going to be done? Raheem, you've got some polling right now about where the American people stand. Where are we?
Yeah, I've been going through this Harris poll. They've been doing a tracker, and this is the seventh wave they've done of this. The questions were asked between April 11th and the 13th, so just a couple of days ago. And they've obviously had some interesting trends going on here. What I want to drill down into, though, is I've been looking at these polling numbers, is the sort of the uniform numbers across the board, the things that haven't really changed since we started this whole thing, and then I'll mention a couple of things that we that have changed. Now, of course, we've had the 30 Days to Save America here, and it's interesting the number of people that are pro some of those measures, if not all of those measures that we recommended and that Jason came up with and the whole team from last month. For instance, 67% of people say they want mandatory mask wearing in public, and 64% say that if there is mandatory mask wearing, that there should be fines for people that don't wear masks in public. So this is something that's obviously been trialed in Europe and is happening in Europe, in many European countries at the moment as well. I want to get into this the idea of reopening, though. We hear a lot about reopening the economy. We're going to hear increasing amounts of it from the White House and so on and so forth, and obviously rightly so. But let's just take a look at what people think about this. 9% say that they want the economy reopened within the next 1 to 2 weeks. That's basically 9% of people saying they want the economy reopened by the end of the 30 days to stop the spread timeline. 23% say within the next 3 to 4 weeks, taking us into the middle of next month. 51% say they want more than 1 month more of the lockdown.
And that's to mid-May.
Yeah, absolutely. And interestingly, 18%, and I'm not sure who these 18% of people are, say more than 6 months.
Well, if you add the 31%, so it's 2/3, 1/3 about between now and the end of May, but after or middle of May, when you get to middle of May, you add that up. That's 80% of the American people. People, I think, are saying where we're trending that sometime, and this is why we still recommend if we're going to take another 30, which looks like we're going to do in some way, shape, or form, unless there's some way that California or maybe one of the western states starts to pop this, and I'll talk about those numbers in a second, where I think intuitively what they're thinking is, then this leads you to the middle of May. And we're just saying, hey, we think you ought to be harder between now and the end of May. If you're going to enter in place, halfway across the country, let's do it right. Let's still shut down the flights coming out of New York. Let's stop the international flights from coming in. Let's do all that.
And that does appear to be the broader view of the American public. I know that there are sort of hardcore conservative libertarians out there who are trying to force this open faster, but the polling, and this is, I'm pretty skeptical of polling, as you know. Every time a poll lands on my desk, Steve, what do I say? I say, give me the number of people they polled, give me the time that it was done, give me the methodology, and then I'll tell you whether or not we want to read this out on air. This one I've gone into. I appreciate the number of people. It's an over 2,000 person poll. The methodology looks solid.
And it's been tracking. You can
It's a tracker.
This
exactly.
is the Harvard Harris guys decided to do this pretty much in depth, right?
And what they're saying is that the public seems to be saying that they support fines for people who are going into closed spaces, so places that are expressly closed by the local authorities, parks, so on and so forth. The people should be fined for doing that. Should be also fined for gathering in people more than 10 people at a time. Is supported, and also that businesses should be able to refuse service to people who refuse to wear masks at those places of business. So I think that's quite interesting information that's coming out from that.
If they think they should be fined for the above 10 people, that means the president's message is getting out there, because the 10 people is his deal, right? Other places have much tougher. So that shows you that what he's messaging, at least part of it's getting through.
And so back to the point that again, some more of the aggressive reopeners, the conservative libertarian crowd that are into this need to be paying attention to, is that 56% of people in this poll say that they are concerned about losing their jobs, and 44% say that they're not. 47% say that they've been impacted financially, 38% have not. 31% say they have lost partial income, 58% have not. And 19% say they have lost income entirely, whereas 81% have not. And interestingly, there is a stroke of American resilience in all of this. People say 1 to 3 months they can survive on their savings without having to dip into anything. 76% saying that they have not yet received any level of assistance, whether that's unemployment benefit or stimulus money or anything like that. And 59% say that after this crisis, they'd be encouraged, firstly and foremostly, more than anything else, more than taking vacations or anything like that, to save more. That this process has taught them that actually they do need to have more in the bank.
If we just didn't have zero interest rates, it may be worthwhile, because right now you're not going to get anything for that except accumulating your own capital. It's a great trend. We want to help that. What we'd like to do is get interest rates up a little bit so people can get there's some juice in the savings account.
I've got two more major things here, and this brings us back to the 30 days to Save America stuff. 87% say they're willing to quarantine. 85% say they're willing to stop all domestic travel. 83% say they're willing to stop hoarding. 68% say they'd be okay with some kind of rationing. And only 31%, of course, I think this is a silly question that Harris has asked here, but only 31% saying they'd be willing to donate some of their stimulus money to their local hospitals. I'm not sure that even follows as a thing. And the really interesting part, from March the 14th to April the 13th. On March the 14th, 46% of people said the response was adequate and the fear level was adequate for this thing, and 54% said that it was an overreaction. Moved a month into the future, 75% of people now say the level of fear about this thing was adequate, and only 25% say that that this thing is suffering, that we're suffering from an overreaction.
If you go back to the 87 numbers, stuff like that, it shows you the American people are on war footing. They're ready. Right?
There's other polling on this as well. To dovetail with what Raheem was talking about, there's a new Politico Morning Consult poll that's out this morning. Similar numbers. More than 8 in 10 voters, or 81%, say Americans should continue to social distance for as long as needed to curb the spread of coronavirus, even if it means continued damage to the economy. Only 10% say Americans should stop social distancing to stimulate the economy, even if it means increasing the spread of coronavirus. 9% have no opinion, not sure who they are. While Democrats are more likely than Republicans to say keep going on the social distancing, it's only 89-72. It's not as big of a spread that I think a lot of times we see on social media, or kind of the passion behind some of the viewpoints. Large majorities in both groups say it's important to stop the spread. Here is this kind of gets into the more the granular things that Raheem was talking about from the Morning Consult political poll. But majorities do want return to take significant precautions if they go back. 76% would support their testing negative for the virus before being allowed to go back to work. So it all goes back to testing. 60% say they should be taking antibody tests to determine whether they've been exposed. And 76% support workers being required to wear face masks. So this face mask requirement these numbers are pretty huge.
The question that comes up on the hashtag War Room Pandemic from Teresa says, but where are we going to get masks? They're sold out everywhere. And that's a major concern for people. If there is going to be mandatory mask wearing in public, and if businesses are able to refuse service to people who don't have masks, well, of course, in the last week or so, you've seen people making them at home, figuring that out. You've seen more businesses turning their, clothiers and things like that. I got an email from this, my American flag jacket. So those guys have now, the company's called Shinesty. They've started to make masks, and they're shipping within the next couple of weeks. A lot of people, especially because of what we've mentioned earlier on in this show, right? The Chinese hoovering up all the PPE from all around the world, started to recognize that we need to, if we're going to get through this, we're going to need to start making it for ourselves. And a lot of American companies also pitching into that, and credit to them.
Pull back for a second. You two guys, the reason we started this show on war room impeachment, you've run war rooms in political campaigns, the Brexit, the Trump campaign. When you see now the trending and the tracking over a period of time, what do you guys take away from these numbers?
I think people are scared. I think people realize that this is going to be with us for a long time. They realize the threat, not just to our right now and this month, but the threat to our country and our civilization. I think people are fully vested in defeating this virus. They will do whatever it takes. And I think they're also hungry for that roadmap, for that plan. And so as they look for the metrics and the data to say, here are the steps that need to be taken, here's what works, here's what doesn't work, here are the phases, here's the structure, how we're going to go about it, I think the American public will be fully on board, whether we're Republican or Democrat.
You think this shows that they understand what the problem is, they understand the gravity of it, but they also understand we got to get on with it. Now, what's the plan to go do that? And it's got to be thoughtful. There may be, hey, whatever happened in the past happened in the past. That's going to be adjudicated. There's an investigation of WHO. There's clearly holding the CCP accountable, all of that, and that's going to dovetail on this. But right now, the focus is how do we come back to the second phase?
You know what was interesting to me, what my takeaway was the uniformity of responses across this thing, across income groups, across demographics, across different class divides, across voting preferences. I saw basically the same results. I always look for this discrepancy. Where are Democrats disagreeing with Republicans? Where are 18-year-olds disagreeing with 65-year-olds? Actually, when you go through this stuff, it's pretty uniform across the board, which tells me that actually America's pulling together in this direction. And I actually don't see fear so much as I see resolve in these poll numbers.
Well, the illuminated mind is what leads you to come up with solutions, but the resolved mind, Emerson that told us that the resolved mind is unstoppable. And I think what we're trying to do here is make sure we get resolved minds. Okay, hashtag War Room Pandemic. We want you as part of the show. Want you part of this community at War Room 2020. And now, because thanks to the good offices of Jack Dorsey, now we're at War Room Pandemic. Also go to our sister site, 30daystosaveamerica.com. We're going to be back in just a moment in the War Room.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. We're now going to talk about opening up the country. Wasn't yesterday supposed to be about announcing they were going to announce the council to reopen the country? I'm still confused. The list is people that are going to be advisors and be in conference calls and give advice, or what's actually happening? Because I think obviously they're moving in a direction to do this. I still believe you're going to have a national conversation. Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci, even if you're using just the outside models, I still think have to come out with, hey, this is what we've done. This is what the metrics. This is how it changed. This is what the downslope of the curve looks like as we can best tell it. This is what the casualty rate's going to be. Here's what actions, and here's that's got to be a detailed, I believe, conversation that the president and vice president can then talk about the policies. But what that model is, I think if because he said yesterday you could actually open up before the end of May. I believe then somebody's working a set of numbers that the president that's got a much steeper drop on the curve. Just no doubt about it, because otherwise you wouldn't. Otherwise, is that glide slope indicator of the slow open, right?
Well, one of the things you're seeing across the healthcare system in the United States, outside of these hotspots, these big cities, you're seeing hospitals really go into financial difficulty because they've eliminated all of the elective surgeries. Hospitals in some of this flyover country are essentially empty with whole staff sitting on their hands. So I do think that there are certain areas of the country that we should treat differently than we're treating, say, in New York City, northern New Jersey, Westchester, Connecticut. And I think that that's only a rational thing. I think one of the bigger problems that we're dealing with now is you've got Fauci, you've got Birx, you've got the guys from Harvard, you've got the Stanford guys, everybody talking about the fact that this thing is more than likely going to be with us forever. And they did a very interesting study that was published yesterday out of Harvard, where they were looking at these other coronaviruses that are in the human population. Now, these are not nearly as lethal as this one, but they're finding that the immunity doesn't last for any of these things, maybe maximum of 18 months of immunity. And when we hear more and more people talking about these vaccines and the limited reality that we're likely going to get one anytime soon, especially when you compare it with our attempts to create vaccines for other coronaviruses like MERS and SARS-1. I think that at some point we have to start discussing how we are going to live as a planet with this new risk factor amongst us, because we cannot stay in lockdown forever. And I thought one thing that was very interesting, the CDC in that released memo where they're talking about how they reopen, they prioritize as the number one thing that they've got to open first are childcare, schools, etc. Now, I would argue that they probably should have been kept open all along because those people would get the disease and not be ill. And
no, but they give it to their parents. That's why you shut it down.
Right. But most of those
But
parents.
besides that, it was okay.
Most of those parents are under 40 years old too. And one thing that we're seeing now, and I think this is something that the government has completely failed. Every single government, and I think it's because of political correctness. The people who are most likely to die of this should have been warned up front. And there was interesting information coming out of studies of what they were finding in Italy and also in New York and in Spain. Guess what? Obesity is a higher risk factor than smoking cigarettes for this disease.
Mm-hmm.
But
what's too much pressure on your heart? That's what it ends up being.
Of course,
right?
I mean,
in hypertension, high blood
mechanical
pressure.
breathing, and you're lifting an extra 20 pounds of flesh on top of your rib cage. Yeah, it's not a good outcome. But these are things. These are risk factors that we should start having a discussion about general health. I think here because we've got to move forward.
Well, I think immunity.
past
I
this.
think basic immunity and getting your immune system up, and also health is going to be two things that come.
This
out
is
of
usually the part of the program where Steve reminds me not to criticize any members of Congress from New York.
Exactly. But let's stay on this. Let's go to the FEMA CDC because I'm still confused in that Dr. Burke said there's 6 potential reopening scenarios out there on the internet. We've gone to, you got the Morgan Stanley one, you got the AEI, now you've got one that was leaked. I mean, not leaked, handed over, I guess, to the Washington Post or Politico of the CDC FEMA, at least their 16-page analysis. Where do you think we stand with all this, given that plan beats no plan? Newsom comes out with his 16 or his 12 bullet points that you have to have before you reopen. The governors, I think today, the consortium is going to put out something of what they're working on. The White House is going to have these conference calls over the next couple of days, right? But their plan seems like it's going to come out within the next 48 hours?
Well, I think the White House is quickly realizing that these governors, as we discussed yesterday in very granular detail, these governors are going to start mapping out their own plans. And before we get to the CDC and FEMA one, we talked yesterday about how Governor Gavin Newsom from California was going to go on TV and really map out his plan. And they made it sound like it was going to be real specific, and here's how they were going to go and put these put their parameters out. But it basically ended up just being kind of a big outline. Here's some very big, broad things that we need to go and do. We need to improve testing. We need to. So there was really nothing that was at all special about it. It was just all kind of big picture stuff. But it's clear that these guys are going to start putting meat on the bones. And so as we talk about this CDC FEMA thing, and again, I want to make clear to everybody, this is not the coronavirus task force. This is not Vice President Pence. This is not Dr. Fauci or Dr. Burke saying this is our draft product. These are kind of the staff grunt dudes, the bureaucrats that are putting this together.
It is the type of thing when you go out there and say, hey, I want to have a draft of a plan by Wednesday. The staff's working over the weekend, and this is their product, imperfect as it is, that goes as a component piece to an overall plan.
Yeah, in many ways, this kind of came across to me as kind of like a vision board, of like here's some kind of big picture goals that you'd like to have. So it's a 36-page document. It's called Focus on the Future, Going to Work for America. It kind of reminds me of was that like Steve Forbes' campaign slogan from like back in '96? But that's fine. But it's
is that the one losing campaign you didn't work for? Before you came to the Trump campaign?
I've won every campaign I've been a part of, even the ones I didn't win. But it really
except for the one, and you shut down Rick Wilson in the Senate run for Rudy quickly.
The Senate run that never happened. That's a great bio tagline. Hey, I was a consultant for a race.
By the way, could you help Justin Amash? I think he's floating a run this morning. He's saying he's going to run.
That guy needs to take a long walk off a short pier. But anyways, but really what this CDC FEMA plan does is it lays it out in 3 phases: preparing the nation to open. It's from now and through May 15th. We'd be ramping up manufacturing and testing kits. Then it kind of starts adding things on after that. But if you go to the actual plan, a lot of it's very, very kind of high level, like steadily decreasing infections, health system capacity to absorb effective reopening, public health system capacity for case identification. So they're starting to come up with different categories. But the reason why I'm not spending too much time breaking this down, I want to get to, these are all good thoughts. So these are like the things to do by, initially they said they want to have this done by April 15th. they need to start putting in the numbers and how you quantify. So
Metrics.
And this is when we get Joe Norman on. He can go into this. But when you talk about steadily decreasing infections, what is going to be ultimately that benchmark? Will it be a continually decreasing for 2 weeks in a row? Will it be decreasing by X percentage? Will it be? Are we just going to go by decreasing infections or by deaths?
They have to give us. Jack, jump in here. I think they have to give us one of the stats I look at it every day is the increased testing percentage versus the percentage of active case of infections. That's a good trend to see. How as you increase it.
Well, I don't know. Really, the only solid data point that we have are the number of deaths. And now we're increasingly, Jason and I were talking about it in the break, we're increasingly seeing the speculation that certain cities are actually elevating the number of COVID-19 deaths.
Well, I think the only one that did that was New York, and you can't add that to the death thing. That can be some sidebar, but you got to be able to identify. They have to be tested. You got to see if they had the virus.
It goes very similar
because
to what
they're trying to add. This is the situation where they're blaming President Trump for 9,000 dead in Puerto Rico for the hurricane. That may or may not be some analysis you do, right? Because there are opportunity costs about doing that, right? About other people that die, but you can't add that into something when you're actually looking at the thing itself.
The real key data point for all of us to look at when this thing is over is going to be the excess deaths, right? Because you have an average number of deaths every year. It's about 2.8 million in America. So it's roughly, I think, 8,000 dead a day. So if during this pandemic that 8,000 turns into 14,000 every day, hey, the pandemic was really bad. But if that 8,000 turns into some sort of range that's been matched over the last decade, I think we're going to have some real questions. I think one of the big problems that the American people have right now with our leadership, and I leave the president out of this because
when you say that, this is not backed up by any number out there. When you say that, go back to any poll and show me where they have a problem with that.
What do you mean they have a problem with that?
Well, you keep saying the American people, and we keep seeing the polling.
No. I'm saying when this is over, I think the American people are going to have a hard time if this actually does look like in a decade, like a bad flu year in terms of excess deaths. There's going to have to be some serious explaining about why it cost us $4 trillion this year and didn't cost us that much in 2017 or 2015.
I'm sure that'll be adjudicated over time, but I don't think that'll be the outcome at all because I think people understand it's a mass casualty event.
Yeah,
you can't get away from that.
UK general death toll is doubled during this thing.
It's the largest. It's the number one death cause of death in the country right now. Right? You guys keep trying to rewrite it and said, well, these people will die. This is why if the libertarians keep going on this path, the guy from Indiana, Hollingsworth, if you keep going down that path, that guy, he's not going to be reelected in Congress. Mm-hmm. He's just not going to be reelected. That's just he said the quiet part out loud that it's not about the deaths, it's about the it's all about the economy. These people are either old or they're minorities or they're already infirmed. That's not the Judeo-Christian West is not built upon that. You're actually going. I keep saying this. We're not an economy that's a nation. This is the problem with all you guys libertarians, all you Austrian School of Economics guys. We're a country that happens to have an economy. Okay, you guys. And he said your point out there. And hey, good luck for that guy in November. I don't see how that guy gets reelected. I don't care how far right that district is in Indiana.
Well, but I mean, getting reelected is not necessarily the point. You can be right and not get reelected. We see that all the time in American politics.
Yeah, Barry Goldwater, right?
Listen, I understand, but I mean, I think that we have to look back at our history and we
George
talk about.
H.W. Bush.
I want to make sure it's quite important. I think that we win in November, right?
I understand, but I think we're complicating that ability to win in November by the way we've handled this. And if you talk about our history, the land of the free, home of the brave.
You think the president's made mistakes?
I don't think that the president's made mistakes. I think that the people surrounding him have made mistakes. And I think one of the big problems that I have personally, I can't speak for others.
But he makes the decisions, correct?
He makes the decisions in consultation. And I think part of the problem is this panic that has overtaken the country has made it so that he can't make rational decisions.
You don't think you're saying you don't think the president made rational decisions?
I personally think that we're all going to look back on this a year.
I didn't ask you that. I'm asking you a direct question because you're hobbling around. Do you think the president made mistakes and you think he made irrational decisions?
No,
yes or no?
I think the president has made good decisions.
Okay, but then his decisions are this, right? Did he not shut down the country?
He did shut down the country. But
support the governors to shut down the country?
I think that he didn't have a choice in that. Do you know why?
You think
because you had Wall Street went and cried to the Treasury, and all of a sudden we're talking about rebuilding the country before we've even gone to war. That's a first in history. Then you had Wall Street.
What are you talking about, William McLaren?
Wait a second. When everybody said we're going to need this massive economic stimulus plan, we hadn't even gone to war yet.
But
we'd rebuilt the country before the first bomb had dropped.
Did the president make good decisions or not? Yes or no?
I think that the country at large has made bad decisions. I don't think the president's in charge. He's not in charge. Fauci and Birx are in charge. If he was in charge, he'd be getting blamed for this.
We'll come back to this.
We're going to come back to this. We love it in the war. No fighting in the war room. Okay, we're going to come back to this in just a second. Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam, Jason Miller, Stephen K. Bannon will be back in a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. We got a lot to go through. I want to turn first to Hollingsworth's campaign manager, Jack Maxey. Tell us, Jack, what's happening down in Brazil with is it chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine?
Chloroquine. Now, this is one of those cases where the media obviously puts as a headline any anecdotal story that does not seem to be positive for the hydroxychloroquine regime. There was a small study done down in Brazil that everybody has seen in the press lately. They were giving these people a significantly higher dosage of chloroquine,
but it was
not the hydroxychloroquine.
But it was like 3 times. It wasn't 30% more. It was like 3x, right? 3 to 4x.
It was about double the dosage they were giving otherwise. And the problem with chloroquine has about a 30-day half-life in your system, so that when you take 200 milligrams in the morning and you take another 200 milligrams the next day, effectively you've got 490 milligrams inside your body. But so when it can build up in your system, and I think that's the problem, and there's some salts inside of it that can create an imbalance with your heart rhythm. And they were having this problem in Brazil. Now, all of these patients in Brazil, every single one of them had comorbidities, were in very bad shape, and were elderly. So you could imagine these things being a problem, and obviously they didn't have access to the hydroxychloroquine, which is a little bit milder on the system than the original compound.
So that thing's blown out of proportion because it's on mainstream media all the time.
Totally blown out of proportion. And if you look at what's going on around the country, you're seeing this hydroxychloroquine regime being used everywhere. And we talked about this about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Some Australians had done a study with ivermectin. And there's an article in the New York Post today about doctors using this extremely effectively down in Miami. Now, one thing that I am hearing from all doctors who are using these regimes, you got to start people on the medicine at the first sign of symptoms. Once the guy's on a ventilator, it's too late. So the best metric would be first symptoms. Does it help? Does it end your viral load more quickly? These are all important questions, but I think that the antivirals are going to be our way out of this. I don't see social separation. I don't see a vaccine being the answer in the long run.
Well, the Swedes are now urging more social separation and more people to stay at home, even if they have a mild cold or sore throat. Don't
ruined the rest of Jack's day.
Do any non-essential travel, and I hate to break it to you.
He's always got Bolsonaro.
Deaths per million in Sweden now up to 119. That's time and a half as far as the US numbers are concerned per capita. You lost Sweden, Jack.
Let's before we go.
If this will risk, you lost Sweden.
Look, you say I've lost Sweden. The Swedish people themselves don't feel like they've been lost. They are still enjoying their lives. They are practicing personal responsibility and social separation. One of the great problems
that's going on here.
One of the great problems
they
that
still
I've
have
had
IKEA and reindeers
with this entire thing is how quickly the free people of the West were willing to put chains on their wrists. This is, to me, unprecedented in history. We can go back to the 1918 flu pandemic. I think the total federal expenditure was about $500,000.
You can look at it differently, that people came together to defeat this then turn it around and get on with it.
But again, what is the defeat? All the scientists are telling us we aren't going to defeat this, so all we're going to do is cow on our knees for the next 18 months?
I don't think you see that at all. I think American people are saying, how do we do a smart, focused... Yeah. I don't think they're buying. Yeah,
what is victory? What is victory?
Most people are saying 2 to 3 weeks. Jack, don't misrepresent the argument. Nobody's saying in this room, especially, nobody's saying we want to keep this thing shut down for the end of the year. Anything like that.
What is the end game?
we're all on the same page with the end game, right? We all want a return to normality.
Right.
It's about the travel, the way we get there.
As soon as
here's the
safely
thing,
possible.
Just the last thing, look at the numbers that we just said. 46% a month ago said it was an overreaction. Now only 25% are saying that.
Okay, we're going to continue this tomorrow. Okay, but we got to get to some of the biggest breaking news of the day. The anonymous Paul Sperry at the New York Post, he's a columnist for the Post. Real Clear Politics Investigations, one of the best groups out there. Real Clear Politics guys are amazing. This was a detailed investigation they ran on what Peter Navarro had come out with about Anonymous. We got about 2 minutes. Walk us through this kind of important breaking news about the disloyalty inside the White House by certain individuals on the National Security Council.
Yeah, so again, this is a piece by Paul Sperry, Real Clear Investigations, realclearinvestigations.com. Read you the intro graph. Ever since a quote-unquote senior official in the Trump administration penned an anonymous 2018 New York Times column attacking President Trump as unfit for office, Washington has been engrossed in a high-stakes whodunit. After an exhaustive investigation, the White House believes it's cracked the case, identifying Trump's turncoat as his former Deputy National Security Advisor, Victoria Coates, according to people familiar with the internal probe. And then it continues on with the story. Rather than fire Coates, White House has transferred her over to the Department of Energy, and while she's awaiting assignment to some ambassador-type post to Saudi Arabia. And it goes through kind of laying this out, how they looked at different aspects, whether it be writing, whether it be access to different pieces of information.
Well, they took every writing and put it. They did computer analysis. I mean, we're going to have it up.
Yeah,
on the
computer
site.
textual analysis with a similar language of things used by both Coates and Anonymous. First-hand accounts by Anonymous of events witnessed only by Coates and a small number of others. The hawkish views. The fact that Coates and Anonymous share a high-profile Washington literary agent is also in there. Her long history of writing anonymously, and then personal details revealed by Anonymous consistent with her own biography. I do need to say in here that she declined to discuss the matter on the record with Real Clear Investigations and has retained an attorney, friends say, although several colleagues, and I'm reading this from the story, have rushed to her defense, insisting the White House has the wrong person. But that's not a denial.
It's not even close to a denial. It's not even an attempt at a denial. This came off of the Peter Navarro. And Peter Navarro keeps popping up, but he's a guy that's got the president's back, always does the analysis. I know he's the trade rep, but this one he went after because he was so incensed that someone would actually write this. And I tell you what, the real story here is not just Victoria Coates and what she did with this. The real story is the New York Times, the paper of record in our country, because at the time that she wrote the first op-ed before the book in October of 18, which was the run-up to the 18 election, she was, I think, a special assistant. She was a grundoon to a grundoon. She was not a senior executive. They played this like she was a cabinet official. Mm-hmm. I'll get into more of that in the days ahead. I want to drill down this because this gets to the heart of what the problem is with the press, continual attacks on President Trump, this relentless. Okay, hashtag war and pandemic. We want to hear all your analysis. We're going to be back tomorrow. I'm sure today in the Rose Garden is going to be at the White House another explosive press conference as we get a couple of days away from President Trump's plan to open up the country again. We'll be back tomorrow morning, 10 a.m.